Hi, I'm Frank Diamond, the managing editor of Infection Control Today. We're helping infection preventionists and other healthcare workers in the battle against COVID-19. With me today is Jeffrey Rose, the Global Technology Manager at DuPont. Mr. Rose has led research and development at DuPont's Korean design section for over 12 years. Mr. Rose is going to talk to us today about challenges for environmental cleaning during COVID-19. Also, how hospital construction projects might be changed due to COVID-19. Mr. Rose will also discuss materials and design features to keep in mind when constructing an interior space. How you must take into account antimicrobial agents. That's a lot of territory, Mr. Rose. Where do you want to begin? And first off, you do have a PhD in chemistry, correct?
That's correct.
So again, that's a lot of territory. Where do you want to begin?
Oh, good question. So first of all, Frank, thanks for having me. Let's start with talking about environmental cleaning and disinfection. So really, whether you're in a pandemic or outside of one, it's really a crucial step and regimen to have really in any commercial sector. So healthcare, of course, fundamentally, but also other commercial segments, hospitality, retail, civic spaces, and so forth. So it's well known that one key mechanism of disease spread is from person to person, and that could be from direct contact or through aerosolized microbes. But interacting with common touch points is another mechanism by which most diseases can readily spread. And while this is a novel coronavirus, there's research that already has come out showing cases of, this is in fact a mechanism, as you would expect with this novel coronavirus. So again, in addition, alongside proper engineering controls like HVAC design and really good hand hygiene programs, particularly in healthcare, cleaning and disinfecting environmental services is really pivotal.
In the best of all possible worlds, we would have had enough personal protective equipment, for one thing, and then the best of all possible worlds, we would have had a vaccine by now. But also in the best of all possible worlds, all hospitals would be spanking new, built within the last 5 years. Well, some of these hospitals are pretty old, and I imagine they present unique challenges for environmental cleaning. True?
Yes. Right. So I think many healthcare facilities, like you said, particularly older ones that haven't had the chance to embrace newer designs and materials that facilitate proper cleaning, have probably found themselves challenged to do it as readily as a newer facility. So there's really a lot emerging in terms of hospital design. We're already seeing trends from architects and designers of how the next healthcare facilities will be designed. So in terms of there's a few considerations. So first of all, aesthetics still remains really important. So that's something to put first and foremost. It seems like it's just, it's how things look. It's not important as far as in terms of function, but it's still really important. You need these welcoming, healing hospital environments, whatever the healthcare facility is. So first and foremost, we are seeing that people still care about how the hospital feels and looks, and it's going to be even more important that you have a warm, inviting feel. So that's first. Beyond that, material selection. The role of non-porous hard surfaces, for one, is going to be extremely important. So surfaces that do not have porosity, do not have places for microbes to exist and sometimes proliferate. But beyond that, not having materials with rubbery or laminated edges that are covering up a more porous substrate. These are really key fundamental material properties, and we see this really all over of architects and designers appreciating that and going toward more and more of those materials. So in addition, in terms of design features, so that's the material, non-porous is extremely important. Design features, you have to really avoid areas that are going to collect debris and microbes. So that could be the rim around a sink, it could be a grout line, it could be a silicone joining of material. So there's all these features that you may or may not find in a given healthcare facility that are really traps for dirt and microbes. They also make it very difficult to clean and disinfect when you have these design features. So instead, focusing on really smooth curved surfaces instead of 90-degree angles, you have a curved surface. You have fully integrated and undermounted sinks instead of a traditional one that goes over the top of the counter. You avoid silicone where you can, things like that. That all contributes to facilities that are, one, hard to trap these dirt and microbes, but second, make it really easy to clean and disinfect.
I don't know if you want to name names, that's great, but are there hospitals that you think set the benchmark for how environmental services should be done and how the environment should be constructed and maintained to avoid infection?
There's certainly a number of leaders in not only healthcare but in the architect and design space that help inform how a hospital should be designed. I think one that I'll cite is Kaiser Permanente. So it's one of the largest integrated healthcare firms in the country, and I bring them up because they I'd say they have very publicly taken great pride in their record for healthcare acquired infections. But also the fact that they have really rigorous cleaning protocols, hand hygiene, and all these fundamental things that build up to a really good infection prevention program. And they very famously in 2015 put out a list of antimicrobials that they would not allow to be in the materials that went into their facility. So they stand out in my mind. One, they have a very good record of disease prevention and in that regard, but they've also in some ways kind of leading the way for what should be really a pause or a concern around materials with embedded antimicrobials.
When COVID-19 first surfaced, of course, we were hearing different things almost daily about it, but one of the things the WHO and the CDC agreed on is that the same things that you would do to prevent infection from other viruses or bacteria, you would do regarding COVID-19. Is that still the case, or do you have to go an extra mile with COVID-19?
No, I think it's still the case. It's again, there's so many difficulties associated with this, and it's not to say that it's not a difficult disease to manage. Obviously, it's not. But as far as viruses and bacterium go, it's considered a relatively easy virus to eradicate because of the structure of the virus. So again, that doesn't say that this shouldn't be a big problem. There's tons of reasons why it's spreading the way it is. But so because of that, really a lot of the disinfectants and sterilants already on the market are highly effective in eradicating this. It's just the means of applying them, having the right substrate that can actually withstand, in some cases, a harsh sterilant or disinfectant to completely eradicate the microbe. So the EPA has a database that's it basically lists all of the registered disinfectants against various microbes and diseases, and they came out with list N as in Nancy in early March and said, hey, here's the list of disinfectants that are effective against this novel coronavirus. So the EPA was way ahead on putting that out and providing that guidance. So really, with any disinfecting material, you can refer to the EPA registration number, tie that back to this database, and be affirmed that, yep, the EPA says that this will work well on the disease. So I'd say that actually it's really the same practices in cleaning disinfection. Much of the same materials are highly effective in deactivating or killing the virus.
Do you have much contact with people who interact with environmental services teams at hospitals? Now, many of my readers are infection preventionists and environmental service teams. I mean, I guess what the question is asking, do you think that they're have been trained well enough, or might this change the way they're trained?
I think this is going to make hospitals really double down on their infection control measures, their staff around that, their procedures. I think it's going to really highlight it as more important than ever that a really well maintained infection control program at healthcare facility is key. So we do interact with hospitals directly and certainly with architects and designers. And again, our focus is really around helping guide material selection. Back to this non-porous is really truly the way to go. These are the surfaces that all these disinfectants work well on, and around, again, the design features. How do you design a healthcare setting that is, first of all, very functional? It again doesn't have any of these areas where it can trap microbes and not be easy to clean. All of that, plus, again, just aesthetic beauty and just a warmth, not only for the patients to provide that environment, but even healthcare workers that have to live it every day for often very long shifts. So that's our main interaction, is around, again, trying to solve problems in material selection and design.
These non-porous materials that you speak about, are they relatively new inventions, so to speak?
Not necessarily. It's just I think it's a renewed focus that, again, and even if you go to the EPA website I referred to that talks about sterilants and disinfectants, it's all with the caveat of this is for a non-porous surface. So I wouldn't say they're new. It's just a matter of choice and understanding their importance. And while something, the surface of it could be non-porous, many things are. It could be a structure where it's supported by a particle board that has a rubbery wrap around it. And you can kind of picture what I'm talking about. So brand new, it may be non-porous, but as that rubbery edge tends to come off, or if a laminated face tends to delaminate or chip off, you're now exposing a porous surface, which could be a real problem. So I'd say that it's not a huge revolution. It's really just, pointing people to non-porous surfaces that give all this design flexibility. And on top of it, if you can have something that looks really nice and creates a nice environment, that's even better.
You talk about design flexibility. Is that something that you look into, how hospitals are designed?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's around, again, our base is it's providing materials that really meet these criteria, and a really important one is that they're easy to work with. They're easy for fabricators, for example, to transform a flat product into a full installation with all these features that I talked about, with COVID backsplashes and integrated sinks, and total seamless installs that are really just ideal for not only healthcare again, but really any commercial segment. And I think other commercial segments are really going to look toward what's going on in healthcare and focus more on design for really good ease of cleanability.
When you say design, do you mean also the layout of the hospital, or is that another department?
Yeah, so that's we're very interested in how that's evolving, and it certainly is. We see trends and concepts already coming out around how hospital design in the broader sense, like layout, like you said, is going to change. So at the highest level, you see a lot of kind of away from the hospital facilities like oncology centers or ambulatory surgery centers. You see those now, but I think we're going to see a lot more of those. I think the desire to break apart some of the functionality of the hospital and spread it out into other facilities to reduce the large population in one building is going to continue to grow. And in addition, you can, if you design them correctly, you can use those facilities for like surge capacity. So if you have another pandemic, you have all these isolated facilities that are serving their role, day in, day out, but they could serve for overflow facilities, in the case of a pandemic. So that's kind of at the highest level. You're going to see it spread out. In terms of, in a hospital, in a traditional hospital, certainly design configurations around, social distancing. It's not just going to be something we're talking about this year. It's going to be reality going forward. Designing facilities where by design, you have people sitting further apart. You have smaller waiting areas, perhaps, instead of a big, large, emergency room waiting area where everyone's sitting, side by side. That's kind of a terrifying sight right now. It's going to be, breaking that apart. At the same time, increasing the capacity of emergency rooms. That's going to be important too. So, the flexibility is another element. Being able to transform, an operating theater, for example, into a different setting where it's for triage or treatment during a pandemic is another feature. So there's a lot we're already seeing of how it's really going to shift the overall layout and design of healthcare facilities.
When you mentioned flexibility, Infection Control Today recently ran a story about how hospitals have had to sort of make negative pressure rooms on the fly, and it was not that difficult to do. So I guess what will be the place of negative pressure rooms in the new hospital after COVID-19, or will it be a flexible design where if we need them real fast, we can create negative pressure rooms?
Sure. Yeah. So one, I think, again, the importance before this pandemic happened, the importance of HVAC design and controlling air pressures, it's extremely important. Like it's a key measure, again, not just in healthcare, but in other commercial spaces. If you have poor ventilation in a space, that's a big problem versus disease control. So it's going to be, I think, on the forefront of, architects' minds going forward. But regarding these negative pressure rooms, we see trends where, building, they're almost like modules or pods that would be not necessarily inside the hospital, but just adjacent to it, that are made for, treatment and this, surge capacity during a pandemic. So you see that would those be built right off and ready to go, perhaps, or would there just be a lot of work to have something where you can quickly set these up in a less maybe chaotic way than had happened this time? So, but the concept of having these negative pressure rooms, even some have concepts we've seen have features where it almost completely isolates the patient from the healthcare provider. And again, they're totally designed for, you know, this type of situation, like with the pandemic. In addition, of course, they would be, you know, very easy to clean and disinfect very rapidly to turn it over for, you know, the next patient treatment.
You alluded, I think, a couple of times in our conversation that what's going on in hospitals as far as trying to contain the next pandemic or the present pandemic, and how they are going to build and rebuild with that in mind, might migrate over into other, the public sector or government buildings. Do you see hints of that people
Yeah,
are?
absolutely. Yeah, we definitely see design, you know, for example, material selection and design features. I'll keep talking about that. That certainly carry over, you know, from healthcare into other commercial segments. I mean, they're really dealing at a different level, but with the same problems of you have multiple people touching the same things in the same space. You need, you know, design to help prevent, you know, and sometimes really close quarters, or at least enable, again, really effective cleaning and disinfection on demand to keep spaces clean. So yeah, we see it already. We've seen it before. We see the carryover of these key design features, but I think it's going to be even stronger as every, you know, business owner, every person that manages a civic space is going to be very much on that person's mind, right? So they're going to want to put the best possible forward in their ongoing designs.
Any words of advice or wisdom or encouragement for infection preventionists at hospitals about what might be coming down the pike as far as new designs, new materials?
I'd say just look at things very critically. Of course, this is the time where you know, many companies are going to put forth offerings that they think are going to be the best to solve problems, but it's really taking a very careful look at what's out there, working with you know, other professionals, really keeping up on the literature and what the, you know, the architectural design community is talking about. So it's really being careful about selection. One thing I brought up before is the role of embedded antimicrobials. This is something that is it's been around for decades. So the concept of you have a product that has some kind of antimicrobial agent inside the product, and the premise is that it will actively kill microbes that come into contact with it. So it sounds very promising, but the CDC about 15 years ago concluded that up to that point, there was really no evidence that proved that it actually helped human health. It didn't benefit human populations, even though in a lab you could show that the antimicrobial has efficacy. So that's one. And then even just 3 years ago, Perkins and Will put out a really good white paper that kind of reaffirmed the CDC's guidance, and that, hey, look, now decades later, we still don't see evidence that these types of materials are actually an important part of an infection control strategy. And there's other deficits that are still kind of open items of, you know, can these type of materials that are, again, just always sitting there and actively killing microbes, could they actually create antibacterial resistant microbes? Could they lead to complacency around cleaning and disinfection? Hey, I have the surface that kills things that touch it. I guess I don't really have to clean it anymore. So that's kind of at an extreme, but that's a concern as well. So that's one point. There's a lot of noise around it. It's pretty polarizing. But again, I brought up Kaiser Permanente because they took a pretty firm stand on, you know, not wanting to include these type of materials in their healthcare design.
Jeffrey Rose, a chemist at DuPont, thank you so much for being with Infection Control today.
Thanks, Frank. I appreciate it.